Alexandra, good to see you. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I appreciate that because I know, I know you've been jet setting around the world, haven't you? Seeing interesting things in the US. So I appreciate you making time for me. Let me just kick off with something that we talked about last time. We talked about this idea, well, you talked about how you don't believe in a thing called waste, which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at the world. I mean, what do you mean by that, and why is that important in the context of what you're doing?
Yeah, right. So I don't believe in waste. There's no such thing as waste. I think we so much now live in a time when we produce so much, we consume so much, and there is so much waste. You see this everywhere in our food systems, in our material systems. There's tons of actually loads of very good Netflix documentaries at the moment, really showcasing how much waste we have. But I think there's so much that we can do instead. We have the technology to transform that waste. I don't even really like to use the word waste, so I'm gonna say resource. We have opportunity to turn all of our resources, our secondary resources, into something that not only makes sense, of course, for that environmental side of things, but also is just good business. These are materials, these are resources, these are biomasses that can be food, they can be nutrition, they can be new technology. So, I mean, what it really means is creating more value and less waste or even zero waste because I feel that's just the time is now for that kind of
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah, and I love the mindset. I mean, I think it's a really important way of thinking about what you do. Just give us, I mean, give us some sort of practical. Tell us a few practical details, or tell us a bit about the kind of practice of what you're doing. Because you're. What's interesting is that you're applying that idea in a number of particularly interesting contexts. I mean, just tell us a bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean I wear two different hats, so maybe I'll tell you about it in the context of these two different hats. And firstly is with the Iceland Ocean Cluster. So I'm the CEO there out in Reykjavik in Iceland. And this is a blue economy cluster and hub that's all about bringing people together from both Iceland but around the world. So good ideas can happen in the blue economy. The industry,
Just,
the
let me just,
entrepreneurs.
sorry, let me just interrupt you there. What do you mean by the blue economy? I mean, some people won't be familiar with that. What do you mean
Yeah.
exactly?
Super good question. We get this question actually a lot because I'm not sure everyone is familiar with this word. So when I'm describing it to people, I'll say it really it's the economy to do with everything that's blue. Really, just to put a pin on it. Things that happen in the ocean, aquaculture, fisheries, even ocean tourism, even ocean oil and gas and ocean drilling. These are all part of the blue economy. Everything that happens in rivers, in lakes,
Okay.
can be all kinds of recreational activities as well. So yeah, the economy to do with everything that's blue. Thank you. That's a good question. Good point to start on.
Which is a pretty big economy.
It's one of the world's biggest economies, even if we can compare it against different countries. I think it's like the top four or five economies compared to like country scale economies.
And just to clarify, what you're trying to do is to eliminate waste in that context. Is that fair, or is it more detailed than that? I mean, just tell us about that.
Yeah, eliminate waste, yes, but also really transform the way that especially the seafood sector, that's what we focus on at the Iceland Ocean Cluster. We call our flagship activity 100% fish. So this is the idea of not losing and wasting any of the precious seafoods that we've taken time, energy, fuel, money to capture and farm, but instead really thinking about how can we maximize sustainably value from every part of that fish, not just the fillet or not just the meat of the shell, but the heads, the skins, the bones, the guts, the blood, the shell
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
What could we be doing with it? Because around the world, we know we lose and waste more than 23 million metric tons of edible quality aquatic food. This is
Yeah.
numbers from the World Economic Forum,
That's
which is
extraordinary. That's extraordinary.
it's extraordinary, and most of that waste is really happening at this point where we land seafood and are processing it. And so we've been focusing in Iceland with all the ways that with Atlantic cod, our big catch there. How could this be totally reimagined? How can we use every part of the fish and really that's transformed the seafood sector, but the blue economy in Iceland. And now it's looking at scaling that out around the world. So really, it's not just I don't believe there's no such thing as waste. I've seen that we
Yeah.
can do something
Yeah.
else. There is value there, not waste.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that you're the CEO of another company. I mean, tell us about this other area that you're focused on, because that's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it's linked. So for the with Iceland Ocean Cluster, I'm the CEO with the hat on there, and the other company is called Hringvarmi. So I'm a founder there. We're two founders, so I'm the founder and chairman, and then Justine Van Alst is the founder and CEO, and we have a team of engineers working with us at the moment. And this company called Hringvarmi is an Icelandic word we created for this company, and it literally translates as circular warmth. So it really fits also in this context of there's no such thing as waste, because here we work with excess heat from different industries, starting with the data center industry, actually, where these industries, including data centers, they take in cold air to cool their computers and in the Arctic, and they release warm air or warm water as an excess material and or excess waste product. And we know, for example, for every 1 megawatt of energy a data center uses, they produce about 1 megawatt of energy in the form of excess heat, which really in our mind is it's energy inefficiency in a time when we know we can't be inefficient with the energy that we have. So we capture this excess heat directly from data centers and other industries, and we channel it into retrofitted and recycled shipping containers that are fitted out to be farming pods. So it's really to provide infrastructure
Okay,
to
so
local
it's
industries.
warm places to grow stuff.
Exactly. It's warm, controlled environments, particularly something we lack in the Nordics and the Arctic region, to grow local food, to give us more growing space, but also more variety of food. Both me and my co-founder, we're real foodies, and we've been living in Iceland for a long time. I'm from the UK originally. She's French, and we were missing our variety of vegetables. That was the first kind of spark in the mind there of, okay, what now?
Okay, I mean, what a brilliant idea. And just sort of go back to the beginning. I mean, how did you? I mean, what sort of set you on the path that you're on? I mean, it seems an odd. I mean, you hear a lot about people, Brits moving from Britain to Spain or whatever. I mean, I don't suppose it's quite so many people move from Britain to Iceland. I mean, what set you on the path that you're on?
It's a really good question because right now it's snowing in Iceland and I'm wondering why I'm not in Spain.
Right.
But I've actually lived all over the place. So I grew up and I was born in and around London, and I studied there and I studied marine biology and oceanography. That was kind of my first step into the science part of the world. But I've been a scuba diver for life. So since I was 12, I've been diving, started diving with my dad as a child, and I really just totally fell in love with the ocean ecosystem,
Mm.
particularly fish. It was really love at first sight. So I've been working with fish throughout my career in seafood in many different ways. But in studying marine biology and oceanography, I got the opportunity to move to Singapore for a little while, where they have a really interesting food tech sector, where the ocean space is really interesting. There's so much human interaction with the ocean space there. And it's the island of Singapore is really there's a lot of maritime activity, but there's also coral reefs and seagrass beds. And this was quite fascinating to me with my ocean hat on. And likewise, I was diving around the world and seeing lots of ocean locations where it was both beautiful, but there was, fishing gear or elements of the impact of blast fishing, which impacts the reef, but it's a way that often in island communities, for example, fish are captured. So I was seeing a lot of this mixture of beautiful ocean ecosystem and the importance of it for food, but also how much impact we were having on it as humans. And I actually, after my degree, I ended up moving to work offshore in the oil and gas sector, partly because of my oceanography background, and I'd worked a little bit with navigation. And this was really it was a bit of an odd career turn, but as a marine biology graduate, it's sometimes hard to figure out what to do next. And I was offered this job, and it was fascinating. So I got shipped out to the coast of Brazil and West Africa, working as a navigator on like seismic vessels looking for oil and gas. And this was fascinating because it was still part of that ocean economy, but it was a totally different side of it. It was the scale of, how we seek energy as humans on in these large,
And it is vast, isn't it?
It's really vast. I mean, we were on a large ship, and behind the ship we towed about 10 to 12 kilometers of equipment. So like the just the scale is really hard until you've seen it maybe like from above. Um, and we would be out really far on the high seas. You wouldn't see land for weeks and weeks at a time. But what you did see is the seismic vessels, but also fishing gear that got tangled in, turtles, unfortunately, and our equipment that was not feeding anyone because it had broken away from the shoreline. They call it ghost fishing gear, but it also, it was having impact still. So it was all this was whirring in my mind of here are all the impacts we have on this such an important ecosystem when we're seeking energy and food. So it was really this that drove me back to school, actually, and I ended up going to do a master's in Europe and moving around different countries. So there's been a real international focus in my life of I spent some time in Spain and Belgium studying there and eventually realized that aquaculture and seafood production was really that felt like a good way to figure out how to do that better because we need to feed the world. But how can we do that in a way that isn't, damaging our oceans long term? So that was eventually what brought me to Iceland, where they really have been very dynamic in the development of aquaculture and blue ocean innovation. Yeah.
And in terms of what you're trying to do, I mean, how are you going to define success for that? I mean, I know you're making progress because we've talked about it. How are you defining success? I mean, I'm interested in where you want to get to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think there's both on the like for my personal and professional side, they really align here because I think every time that we have a conversation with a leader or an entrepreneur in a different ecosystem or a government, and we see that there's this transformation in the way that people think. I think that's always the first step. That's the first, for me, is the first sign of success. And they go, oh, hey, actually, not only are we throwing things away or with biomass away, it's costing us to throw these shells from this fisheries processing facility. It's actually costing us money to throw that away. And what you're doing in Iceland, we use the example of Atlantic cod in Iceland, where a fish that was once worth about 12 US dollars for just a fillet and then not a well processed fillet to now an ecosystem where an Atlantic cod, we can use it in food, nutrition, cosmetics, textiles, biomedicine. A fish has a value of almost 5,000 US dollars.
Yeah.
And they look at that and they go, it's like the aha moment that you see in people's eyes. So that would be it was always the
I
first
mean,
sign of success.
it's really interesting you say that because, I mean, what you're saying is getting rid of rethinking waste makes really good business sense.
Yeah.
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 And the
Yeah.
sad bit, sorry, this is just because I've just seen it. I mean, the sad bit is that I don't know what it's like where you are, but they're in the UK, they're huffing and puffing because the price of fish and chips has gone up. Right, there's no discussion in the papers about what you're doing and the things that the industry could really revolutionize. The people are huffing and puffing about price of fish and chips, and that's going to be a political issue, no doubt, in the run up to the election. But to come back to your point, though, I mean, it makes such good business sense, doesn't it? I mean, that's what you're really saying.
Yeah. And I think for anything that's gonna transform and protect the environment,
Hmm.
for any, conservation or ecosystem measure, it has to make business sense. It's not just that it does, it has to make good business sense. We need to find ways for these changes in business operations to be good investment cases for companies because if it doesn't make good business sense, businesses won't do it. And it's really that's going to drive a lot of the positive transformation that we need to see. Although I want to comment on your UK fish and chips
Oh,
thing
go
because
on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think what's really interesting, and I agree, is there's so many ways that this can be reconsidered. And there is with the Iceland Ocean Cluster, we have sister ocean clusters around the world. It's something we've been building out into this international ecosystem. And there is a Scottish Ocean Cluster, and they are really doing amazing things to start to lay the groundwork for what does this look like for the seafood sector in Scotland, for of course the aquaculture sector there, and for the fisheries sector there. And yeah, I would love to see what does that look like in the context of different types of seafood dishes that are using different parts of the fish. And that's a big conversation is how do we get chefs involved all around the world too?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's really exciting. I think because it opens the door to doing things, some really creative things. And I mean the food sector actually is extraordinarily innovative. I mean you've got to stop them. I think the food sector. I mean you've got to hold them back. They're because they're so creative. So I think it's a really good thing. To come back to the discussion about the industry, though, I mean what you're saying is you want to change the way the whole industry works globally. I mean, I love to see a bit of ambition. That seems to me to be a big ambition.
It is a big ambition, yeah.
How are you going to do it? I mean, give us a sense of how you're going to make this happen. I know, you're at a relatively early stage at the moment, but I mean, just give us a sense of how you are proposing to make that happen, because it seems to me to be a pretty good thing, quite difficult to achieve.
I think it's really, yeah, I think it's a big ambition, but I think it's good to have big ambitions.
Yeah,
And definitely, I would say at the Iceland Ocean Cluster, we don't think we're going to make that big change alone. It's not just going to be us driving this mo movement. I mentioned these 13 sister ocean clusters around the world, but I think also what we're focusing on now is both empowering other leaders, other ecosystem leaders around the world, and really trying to figure out and map out and provide a playbook. That's what we're working on right now. It's called a 100% playbook of what has worked in Iceland with Atlantic cod. How have we gone from this, just the fillet being valued, to now what is this really diverse ecosystem of
yeah,
types of
yeah,
products,
yeah.
from collagen peptides to biomedical applications. But we've also had the opportunity to test this out and adapt this and build it in other ecosystems. We've been working with a team in the Great Lakes in the US and Canada, for example, for the last 5 years, where they've gone from, seafood sector where some of their fish, only 35% of that fish's biomass was being used, like with yellow perch, which is one of the key catches there. And now they've called it the 100% Great Lakes fish
Okay.
movement. We work closely with them, and they've got 90% of the producers in the region to sign on to this 100% fish pledge. They've mobilized investments, and with our support and in connection with amazing collaborators, they've built out new value chain opportunities. They've been identifying low-hanging fruits. So we've been testing it out. Okay, how does 100% fish thinking look in a really different ecosystem? Because Iceland and the Great Lakes, we're totally different
Yeah.
in almost every aspect of how the fishery sector is set up. So we started building it out there. We've been working with groups in the Pacific on tuna, with hake in Namibia. We're looking more and more at salmon, looking at shrimp in Greenland. So we've been over the years now really building out a lot of case studies and examples for what exactly are the core steps that ecosystem leaders like clusters, business leaders like Royal Greenland, for example, that we're working with in Greenland on the shrimp, the entrepreneurs that governments need to take in order to go from, and put waste in inverted commas because there's no such thing as waste,
Yeah.
into really accessible, usable, value creating, good investment case products and resources.
And I mean, it sounds to me like a really great idea. Are people responding positively to it? Because I mean, I mean, it's like, I mean, things like renewable energy in the UK. I mean, I've always thought that's a really good idea. Not everyone likes it though. Not everyone responds positively to it. I mean, are people broadly responding positively to this? And if so, why is that? Is it because there's a financial incentive to do so?
Yeah, I think I think it's a really good question because there's tons of good ideas out there, and
Yeah.
they don't always necessarily get the momentum or the response that they probably deserve. I think what's really interesting here, and the approach that we've taken with 100% fish, and I would say the cluster is founded by Thor Sigfusson back in 2011. So it's not been an overnight success. It's really something that's been building as a community and a message over a long period of time. And it's really the element of it being good for the environment and being good for business, but also what does that look like quantitatively? What is it that costing the company now not to do this? What is the actual business case?
Yeah.
What does the investment case look like? Looking at really from a quantitative angle, so that because I think a lot of the reasons that businesses don't change or maybe are reluctant to change is because it feels very risky to make change, and
Yeah.
it feels like why would, for example, in the case of renewable energy that you mentioned, so that, putting in a wind farm or putting in infrastructure is really capex capital expensive. So it really has to, you have to justify the numbers. Why does this make sense? But I would say something that we've focused on really hard at the Ocean Cluster is the storytelling piece. What really are those success stories? Where do you start? Now, it's starting with ideas and products that don't take big changes to the existing processing and the know-how or big investments, but can create value. For example, taking the cod livers and pressing them for cod liver oil. This can be done fairly low tech, fairly in
Right.
remote locations. It can add 4 times the value. These are these early success stories that then can be built on, but not just the business, but the entrepreneurs and the ecosystem to it. It's telling those stories of this is the change that can be made. Look at this change that has been made. So I would say that's been something that's been really helped how that the reception of the idea and also then showing how does it work in other places.
I mean, what you're saying is it's not just about the numbers, is it? I mean, the numbers are important, but it's the story of how it works and what the benefits are that engages people, isn't it? And that's why people, if you like, sign up or sign on or get involved because, I mean, obviously the numbers need to make sense, otherwise people won't invest. But it's not, it's the story really that persuades, isn't it?
I think that's so key. I mean, I think connecting with people, and I always think this is the case of, I'm just gonna slide in the word of AI because AI is such an
Yeah.
interesting tool, but it can't replace that building trust and building community and telling those stories of other people and other communities and what this looks like.
Yeah. I mean,
And,
I was just about, can I just ask about that? You see, as you mentioned AI, I mean, one of the questions in my mind was how is AI helping you? I mean, I'm very interested. I mean, AI is, one of the things that everyone talks about at the moment, and I'm interested in how people that are building businesses like yourself, how is AI helping you? I mean, what is it doing for you in this context? I take your point that won't replace lots of things, but presumably it's helping you. I mean, in what way is it helping you do the things that you need to do?
Yeah, I think this is a super good question because we're always trying to figure out more as well and learn. I mean, it's a thing that's evolving so fast. It's like, okay, what is the way that we can best apply this and integrate this in a way that supports rather than kind of drags away from the maybe the authenticity and the importance of what we're doing. So I think with the Iceland Ocean Cluster hat on, there is in just in terms of the wealth of information that can inspire what we do, like even just asking like, what other potential nutritional or functional values are there based on everything that's been analyzed, like using it for kind of deep searching of the scientific literature very quickly to highlight. Of course, you should always go and fact check and then use that as a building block. But I think it can really speed up our incentivizing
It's like
innovations
having your
and
own research assistant.
it's like, oh, I like having a little team army of
Yeah.
research assistants that can start to seed some of those ideas. I think this is a really interesting way to use it. I think also, we're often looking into lots of different ecosystems where we need to learn fast, primarily in dialogue with those ecosystems, but also a bit of a crash course in how that ecosystem functions and what are maybe some of the key priorities of maybe blue economy policy there. So I think informationally is really valuable. I think more and more, I have quite a young team. We're a team of 8 of us in the Iceland Ocean Cluster. And a couple of them, I'm a young leader myself. I like to think I'm still in the young hat category.
You're younger
But
than me, that's for certain.
but I have a team in my early 20s and in their early 20s that are, really keen to learn fast and they're using it to gather data and benchmark information and even look at what might be exciting investment opportunities because we're in the investment space as well in the Iceland Ocean Cluster. Even, doing graphic design and exploring these first ideas where, historically, uh, apologize, my Outlook is not making a ping on your side.
No, it's fine.
Is it good? Okay. So yeah, using these systems to, create new visualizations of information from lots of complicated data. So I would say that we're only scratching the surface of what's possible. And I think with the startup founder hat on with Ringvarni, my own company, I think there it's really interesting because we're a small team, we're very lean, very agile, really in that development of technology stage. So it's all that learning mechanisms, yes, but it's also that area of what we're exploring now with a little bit of agentic AI of how can we actually expand our capacity and team when it really is happening. The startup is developing alongside our day jobs, as it were. So I think that's really interesting and how it affects our capacity to have impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they pretty much all tell me that, building a business, and you're building two. Building a business is a bit like riding a roller coaster. I mean, there are good days, there are bad days, there's everything in between. I mean, what is it about this? What is it that motivates you to kind of jump out of bed every day and get stuck in? Because I mean, it is a tough gig building a business, and you're building two.
Yeah, I think that's really, yeah, a very good question. I have the same with the Iceland Ocean Cluster because this is a an established and it has its reputation, and I've been there for 5 years now of its kind of long journey. So I feel like there's this very strong, stable platform and work to be building on. So there, I mean, for me, it's the excitement of that we're actually getting to transform things. I feel like, and we talked about this, I think, before we started recording, but that, we live in this really complicated world where there are
Yeah.
loads of challenges and it can really seem doom and gloom. There is some terrible things going on in the world. So I think being able to look at a problem, in this case in the seafood sector, and I know my team have also reflected this back to me, like we feel like we are chipping away at
Yeah.
least one of these problems, actually creating positive impact and change. And I think in a time when there's so much desire to do that, that really gets me up in the morning, that it's like, here's a team of people that really want to make positive impact. We actually can see that impact that we're making when we look at, now there is less seafood waste happening in Iceland and the Great Lakes. And in fact, new entrepreneurs are emerging and new ideas and values. So it's really very tangible, the impact that we're having. So I think that's very rewarding. And
Yeah,
that
but that's
definitely
pretty exciting as well, I would have thought.
it's exciting. I will say it's never ever boring. Like particularly anyone that works in a cluster ecosystem, every hour of the day is different. I always describe it as everything everywhere all at once, which
Yeah,
means it's
like
really
the movie. Yeah,
focus.
yeah, yeah. And let me ask you, uh, have there been, you've been on the journey for a while. I mean, have there been any kind of real surprises as you've been coming along, things that have kind of popped up and really kind of surprised you or made you think differently? Or have you had any moments like that on the journey?
Yeah, yes, definitely. I mean, I feel like so I'm from a more kind of academic background. I've moved into this world of business and innovation and gone into innovation perhaps from a different angle than others. And I think I'm always learning something new, but I think what's interesting, I would say what kind of has been a bit of a, not a surprise recently, but like a wake up call of, we work a lot with uh, large scale fisheries, or we have historically focused on places where fisheries are well regulated or seafood is, there is a good infrastructure there to support it. So those conversations, you're building on an existing fairly well structured system that, while it's based in tradition, it is operational businesses, etc. So I think it's more as we spread this message around the world and we work with new parts of the world. I'm thinking particularly about conversations I've had around Cuba and Mexico um, and small island communities like Kiribati, just like in the last 2 weeks, having these conversations of where it is just a totally different ecosystem, and it's understanding, okay, here is a challenge that I've never imagined or come across. Like in Cuba right now, they're looking at speaking to an awesome seafood expert from Cuba, looking at, okay, yes, there is a desire to do 100% fish, thinking, how do we do this? But really, the problems on the ground is that there is not enough fuel for the fishermen to go out and fish in the first place, and the infrastructure is lacking, and there isn't a regulated system. So I think it's always, and in a very good way, challenging my thinking of, okay, well, how do we approach this in a really different ecosystem where there is, the need and the desire and the leaders that want to do more with less and want to do better for their communities and for the ecosystem. So it's really, yeah, it's a lesson every day of how do we approach this differently? How do we lift up other leaders in other types of ecosystems? So,
Yeah.
well,
And
whether it's surprising or not.
you can see why a kind of entrepreneurial mindset helps in those situations because there is no existing playbook, is there? And it's about figuring out how you make it work in those
Mm.
particular circumstances, which is generally what entrepreneurs are quite good at, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think for me, the surprise of that perhaps was it feels very creative what we do. And I think coming from a science background, I don't think of myself as a creative person, but I realize what we do as a team, both at the Iceland Ocean Cluster, but within my own startup as well, is that we have to be very creative because sometimes, like you say, those ideas don't exist yet. So where do we start? That's normally the question in everything that we do is where do we start? Why are we doing this? Why here? Why now?
Yeah.
It's these key
Yeah.
questions.
And let me ask you, I mean, just to follow on the thing about building a business being a tough gig. I mean, you, you've just described actually one of the things that makes it difficult because you're always starting from scratch, trying to figure out a new way forward. And what that requires is a degree of resilience. I mean, how do you, as the CEO, build that resilience into the business? Because you've got a bunch of relatively young people, as you described, working with you. I mean, I mean, I know about resilience because I've had to deal with lots of nonsense over the years. I mean, you don't know that when you're young. I mean, how do you? I mean, I suppose my question is, how do you build resilience into the business? How do you build a resilient business? I mean, what's your take on that process? Because the people bit is
Mm.
quite important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's the resilience of the business and the resilience of the team as well. I think the two biggest things that come to my mind when you ask that is really, and it's what drives cluster thinking and the Iceland Ocean Cluster, but also within my own company too, is collaboration. Collaboration and the diversity of that collaboration. Because I think, particularly with a young team and the founder is not as young as us, but he's also, of course, very involved. So I think the having these different views from different generations, from uh, different sectors of the blue economy, different skill sets. Even within my own team, we have people that are, really analytical data scientists. We have innovation and finance people. We have our CFO used to be a seamstress and has that really kind of creative eye. There is really a real mixture of types of mind in the team, and we see this even when we're building projects and proposals that for me, I'm, a big strategic thinker. I like to think about the big picture and how everything connects. That's my superpower. But sometimes I'm like, okay, what does this actually mean as a detailed analytical framework on the ground? And then our data analyst will come in and say, well, now I see what you mean. Here's the framework I would use. So there's always, so building that, say that resiliency, but also those multifaceted solutions really takes a diverse collaborative
I
team.
mean, I guess what you're saying is that one of the ways you build resilience is by getting people to collaborate and work together, because that process kind of builds momentum that kind of moves people along, doesn't it? You
Yeah.
don't fall over it. If you're on your own, sometimes it can be really hard. But if you're working with a group of other people and there's lots of momentum, I mean, it's easier, isn't it?
I think it's absolutely essential because
Yeah.
we say this too with building out that 100% fish thinking around the world. Not everywhere is like Iceland, not every fish is like Atlantic cod, but there are similarities that are comparable to other ecosystem, and every other ecosystem that we then get to lift up and help, we learn something new. And what's maybe relevant to us in Iceland isn't what's relevant to our Oregon Ocean Cluster, where they have really a maker ecosystem and they have working waterfront and they have lots of artisanal fisheries. That's very different from Iceland, but it's not as different from, for example, the Scottish Ocean Cluster and some of the ecosystem there, or even in the Great Lakes. So it's really this both collaboration, but this kind of global ecosystem exchange of ideas that mean we can really not only are we feeling not alone in the challenge that we're addressing, but we can really move faster and further because there's always something comparable that we can build on. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the point you just made. I mean, you're working in Scotland, you're working in Iceland, you're working in Singapore, you're working in Canada. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting about building a global business is that doing business in Singapore is very different from doing business in London, for example. I mean, there are lots of kind of cultural differences that are about people's expectations of, people in Singapore expect things to be done in one way, and people in London expect them to be done another way. I mean, how do you kind of navigate those cultural differences? I mean, we met through Tuna Girl from
Yeah. Indonesia.
Indonesia or Malaysia or
Yeah,
something.
Indonesia. Yeah.
Indonesia, and they have a work in a very different way to perhaps the
Yeah.
way they do in Iceland. I mean, how do you navigate that kind of cultural stuff?
I would say that's probably one of my favorite things about this
Right.
role and about international work, to be honest, because really nowhere is the same. I think obviously we're all humans everywhere, but the ecosystems in which we exist, the cultural expectations, how information is received, even what's an appropriate level of formality when you're invited to a dinner event, all these like tiny little microcultural things which are just fascinating. And I think particularly I spend a lot of time visiting our different sister ocean clusters around the world. And I think always the first thing that I do is I go into super listening and observation mode because I'm there. A, it's not helpful, it's not appropriate, nor am I gonna be an expert going into an ecosystem and with my here's how it is in Iceland or here's how it is in the UK where I was brought up. But like going into this ecosystem and I go what I call sponge mode actually. I go into sponge mode of like, okay, who is connected here? How does it work? How do people speak to each other? How do they dress for certain activities? What constitutes a formal versus an informal setting here, and how do people like to be approached, and what's like, for example, is something that from the UK to Oregon, because I'm back and forth between Scotland and Oregon quite a bit the beginning of this year. Uh, in Scotland for a workshop, there was a little bit more level of formality. People like to know what they're going to expect when they get there. There is a set up structure. This is a very effective way to get information from people and to get them to feel collaborative and ready. In Oregon, it's much more people like to make sure that they've had their say, and it's very open, and you'll start the session with a marketplace of ideas and who's in the room. Like there is that need to have this context setting, and for me, I'm always learning, which is the dream job in any way. I think a day that you're not learning is a sad day. Like even like in New Zealand and in the Pacific, and there are it doesn't help for us to come in and say, here's what an ocean cluster could look like. So a lot of our work there is like, what do you need? What does the ecosystem look like? How do you work together? And because that's really got to be the starting point when you're moving into other ecosystems. And it's fascinating. It's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good way of describing it. Endlessly fascinating, and because there's plenty to go at in those situations, isn't there? I mean, there's loads and loads of things to learn about, and extraordinarily. I mean, to come back to that phrase, I mean, quite exciting, really, to explore those new ways of doing things, because that's where new ideas come from, isn't it? You think, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we could, those sorts of things. Let me ask you about what you've learned from the
Mm.
journey? I mean, you've been on the journey for a few years now. I mean, when you look back, I mean, what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned from the experiences that you've had?
Mm. Yeah, I think like I say, there's so many things that I've learned, but I think I'm gonna say two things that really stand out is that, to use a cliche, no man is an island. Like we talked about the importance of collaboration, but it's also, you know, what is your support network like, particularly if you're going to be a busy, impactful leader. It's like, okay, well, how are you reflecting on that with, for example, I have an executive coach who's been amazing, Annalisa Winter. She's awesome. But also how do I work with my co-founder, with my team? It's like, what do those interpersonal elements of how we work look like? Because if we have those conversations and we're transparent about that and we build that trust and we build that support ecosystem, there is nothing more powerful than that in terms of how we move through the world. I think that's the thing I'm still learning, and and appreciate more and more every day how important that is. How does that, reflect into our home life and our family life? We don't come to the table as these kind of little automatron robots. We come to the table as whole people, and making sure that the team feel that and that is appreciated. So I would say this. And the other thing I would say is, because the world is so busy, particularly when you have that entrepreneurial
Yeah.
like interest in everything and you want to make change, like the world is busy, it's noisy, it's messy, there's so many things going on, and I see it often with the leaders that we work with, and I feel it myself as well, that it can be very easy to be spread very thin, to be
And
running around, to feel
distracted.
overwhelmed. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
to really to get that uh, that sense of like I think it's from Alice in Wonderland, the expression of I'm running as fast as I can, but I'm staying in one spot. And I think that the what has helped me there and what I'm still, developing is, okay, what is my North Star?
Mm.
what are all the things that I'm doing and how do they overlap? It's often an expression we use in my team. In fact, my team now repeat it back to me, which brings me great joy, but also makes me think I'm repeating it too often. Is the idea of killing two birds with one stone? What
Mm.
are we doing that can have multiple impact across multiple ecosystems?
Yeah.
And so that every piece of work we do creates value for the other piece of work or the other contract that we're working on. Yeah, so this is
Mm.
aligning things towards the same goal and having everything move in the same direction so we don't spread too thin. I would say these are the two things that
Mm.
I'm still learning, but also are, key messages I would share from my own experience.
I mean, I think your point, particularly about the killing two birds with one stone. I mean, mountaineers will often say to you, they won't carry a piece of equipment unless it does multiple things.
Yeah.
And it's a good way of thinking about what you're taking with you, if you like. I mean, I think that's a really important way of thinking about the problem.
Yeah.
It creates a framework that forces you to think a little bit harder and then come up with better solutions, doesn't it? Let
Mm.
me ask you some more difficult questions. What would you say your biggest mistake has been
Ooh.
when you look back?
Hmm. I mean, mistakes are a tricky one, right? Because I feel like you do need to make mistakes to learn. Um, I would say it's probably more on that intersection between the personal and the professional. I think as a person, I can be very hard on myself, and I think, or maybe not feeling that I, can claim the things that I've done, or like speaking up for, and I see more and more the importance of speaking up and being a leader in the room. So I think a mistake that I have made, and I think I'm still trying to self-correct, is, um, you know, if not you, who, and if not now, when. So
Yeah.
I think that process of like, I do want to make the change. I feel very passionate about this. I'm willing to put all my time and effort into it. Therefore, I am a leader in this ecosystem. I'm young, I'm learning, but I'm leading. And I think it's too often that, that internal voice is like, oh well, you're only in your early 30s and you haven't done X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. So I think it is a mistake to it's always a good thing to question ourselves and to be improving, but I think to doubt our abilities, or like for myself doubting my abilities to speak up and be the leader in the room and really stand there confidently, that's something that has been a mistake that I'm now correcting the older I get and the more comfortable I get in these big rooms. And even last week I was on a panel with like amazing impressive people and I was like, should I be here? I was like, no, yes I should. I should be here.
Yeah, so you should, yeah. I mean, I think it's really one of the things I love about entrepreneurs is that they are much more open about talking about mistakes,
Mm.
and that's really important because that's how you learn, as you just pointed out. I mean, I often talk to politicians who never admit they've made a mistake. Well, which is not tremendously helpful because it means you can't grow and develop, you can't improve policy. So, I think it's one of the things that's great about entrepreneurs is they're much more willing to say, okay, well, we didn't get that right, but we're going to do this to fix it.
Yeah,
And yeah, and there's an incentive for that, isn't there? If you don't fix it, you go bust ultimately.
yeah. And I think it's
That's
a trust
really important.
element too. We people trust you more as well if you're
Yeah,
open about, okay, well, this is a mistake I made, or I could do this better. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And let me ask you about the flip side to that. I mean, what are the bits about building the business that you've enjoyed the most? I mean, what are the things that really make you happy?
I think both with the Iceland Ocean Cluster coming in as a CEO there, and with Hringvarmi building it with my co-founder from the beginning, I think the thing that's been I feel like the thing that I really is my, like say, my coach always says zone of genius. I like this piece is zone of genius is really understanding how does everything connect together, and really how do I bring the team along and build the ideas that are gonna people that are gonna make impact. So I think connecting all the dots in both contexts is really the powerful thing of how can all these moving parts stick together and move in the right direction.
Yeah,
I would
and,
say
and
that's
powerful. I mean, it's interesting you say that because powerful it is because I mean, in one sense, innovation is about joining the dots up. But to be able to join dots up, you've got to have all of them on the table, haven't you? If you've only got four dots on the table, there's a limit to what you can do. If you've got 20 different ideas, there's so the joining the dots thing sounds simple, but actually it's really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think all the more reason for collaboration because that brings more dots to the table.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Let me ask you about if you were to start again, if you were to start from scratch, is there anything you'd do differently now, knowing what you know now?
I mean, I think I'll take that with the Hringvarmi hat on because I think with Iceland Ocean Cluster, obviously, I don't want to take credit for founding that because that's really coming from Thor's and Thor's baby. And I think there, what I'm learning is that, we can really, we're at this really interesting growth phase of reaching new audiences and building this in different ecosystems. So there, the thinking is maybe not what we'll do differently, but what is really the driving factor in different ecosystems is not going to be the same. So it's not a plug and play model. So it's always reworking how do we tell the stories? What does this look like? I think with Hringvarmi, with my own business, so we founded this well formally about a year and a half ago as a legal entity, Hringvarmi. And there I think it's been really interesting because we've gone into the agri-tech world and they're building an infrastructure. So I think maybe the thing that I would do differently perhaps is get a prototype and a physical MVP on the ground maybe a bit faster. I think as we were building this idea and the feasibility of it, can we connect to data centers and capture their excess heat and put it into controlled environment shipping containers? There was a lot of data collection that happened first. And I think the reality of it as we have now deployed a prototype and are deploying our MVP. I think we could have even moved faster with that. And it is a solution that's urgently needed in the data center sector. And we have great data center partners in the Nordics
Well,
like
there's
Atmos.
something about giving people a physical thing and say, have a look. I mean, it
Yeah.
has a real powerful impact on people, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it is the most powerful thing because I think when you're just describing an idea in both hats that I wear, when you're just describing a theory or idea, it's not tangible enough for people to believe in it and get inspired by it. With 100% fish in Iceland, we show them the products that are on the market. We show them how they're marketed. We show
Mm.
them,
Yeah.
the value, the profit sheets. What does this look like? In at Hringvarmi, in my own company, now we can say, come and have a look at this container, have a look inside it. This is how we produce microgreens. Eat some of the microgreens we produced in this container. So I think there's something that humans really kind of need to experience, see and touch and feel with their own hands to really feel inspired and connect with. And that's why, storytelling, visual information, practical hands-on
Yeah.
experience will change people more than anything else,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Couple of final questions before we wind up. If you were to offer a rookie CEO just starting out one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh. It's funny to get this question because I feel like I mean, I've been in the CEO role for a couple of years now, but it still feels so fresh. Like every day is fresh. I think a small piece of advice, but actually is quite a big piece of advice. Take a deep breath. You can't be everything to everyone all of the time. What you can be is, come to the table in a thoughtful, calm, and collected way and really lead in something you deeply care about. But take a deep breath before you do it because that will ground you.
Pretty good advice, I think. Pretty good advice. One last question. What is it? I mean, you're on the brink of doing some quite interesting stuff. I mean, what is it that really excites you about the next bit, the next leg, the next phase of what you're doing? I mean, what's the stuff that is kind of getting you excited in terms of where you're going?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is something we're working with at the Iceland Ocean Cluster. I've talked about how we're trying to build this out into really a globally accessible information. We're building this playbook of 100%. We've been generously funded by Builders Vision in the US, which is a philanthropic organization. So seeing them getting behind this idea and helping us spread it is really exciting. And with this playbook, what we're doing is actually then bringing ecosystem leaders from around the world from different like maturity systems in terms of their seafood sector and the seafood utilization and getting to in 2027, bringing them to Iceland, plugging them into a transformational 100% program so that really they can fast track what they do in their own home ecosystems. Because myself and Thor, the founder, we spend a lot of time traveling around and connecting with people on the ground. But we're a small team. There's not there's only so many people we can reach one by one. So the power of bringing people to Iceland or bringing them to other centers maybe in the future to fast track their learning, to give them that, we just talked about that importance of that hands-on, tactile, that the visualization, that storytelling, that connecting with an idea. I feel really excited about that because I really feel that that's going to be the way that we start to accelerate the change that's happening around the world.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I'm sure that's going to be really. I mean, the way you just described it, then I mean, I was thinking, God, that sounds really good fun and really interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be a
So,
big, an important kind of trigger point to move people forward. So, I mean, good luck with that, Alexandra. Thanks for taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat. I mean, I'm biased because I think what you're doing is really cool, but I mean, I really appreciate you making time to come and talk about it, and good luck going forward. I mean, as we were just saying, I mean, lots of exciting stuff on the horizon.
no, thank you so much. Thanks for the interest in taking the time to discuss. It's always nice to reflect on all these things that are bumbling around my head.
Yeah. See you again soon then.
Love you. Thanks so much, Paul.
Bye bye.
Bye.